See, a lot of people in our culture, they are so used to things coming out of a factory where it's some glossy, machined perfection that many get a hungering for something that looks like a tree still. They want to see sapwood or a waney edge with bark on it or knots, because that, even though you can imitate that in melamine, that's very desirable. Now, in traditional carpentry, generally you avoided using wood like that. You preferred really straight grain, and the mark of skill was to make it into a flat, glassy surface. So it's all turned on its head nowadays, unfortunately, but
Do you use scrapers at all?
sometimes with difficult woods, I'll use scrapers. Take a perfectly good stick of wood and beat it up so it looks older. There's a whole industry of antiquing stuff. I used to work in a furniture, when I was going to university, I got a part-time job in a furniture gallery, J. Collins Furniture Gallery, very fancy. I was in the warehouse side of things. I saw a little different side. I saw all the furniture coming in and it had been damaged because it had been manhandled, not to be sexist, in the process. And all the pieces just went into the back room where someone doctored it up to make it look like nothing had ever happened. And he was the most important guy in the whole place. He got paid the most, so, other than the manager. So. That was a bit disillusioning for me. My impression of fine furniture changed a little after that because it was a fine furniture gallery. Yeah, in Japan, like there's certain things where the wood is treated like a netsuke, which are these little tiny ornamental figures that samurai often had on a little their coinage pouch or something. It's a whole art form to itself. There's treatments where you hammer little dimples into it, plane it, and then soak it with water, and the dimples pop up and it looks like goosebumps. So there are little sophisticated things you can do, but the admired finish in Japan, the admired finish for me, is the hand-planed finish. The hand-planed finish presents something that's a glossy, clean, it's the wood at its most perfect and without any adornment or coating or anything. This is just a cutting board. Yes, this wood really is purple, and it's from Central America. It's great for dock pilings because it's so rot resistant. I was given this as a gift from another woodworker. He makes cutting boards and various things like that. And this side he sanded and put a coat of oil on it. That's finished. On the other side, I decided to hand plane it off, put no finish on it. And I believe actually this finish lasts longer because the fibers are sliced really cleanly, so there's nothing to pick up water so fast. Also, when I shave, I like to use a blade, not a sandpaper, because I think I get a better finish that way. So the stuff that comes off this wood, they're called shavings. The fancy English word is excelsior for shavings. It used to be packing material in the 19th century. So this is the shavings. This purple stuff, well, it comes off of the Purple Heart. And the other wood is Honduran mahogany. I really like that wood to work. You're welcome to have it. I'll just pass this around. You can put your hands on that and have a look. The next piece I'm going to show is something I've long wanted to make because I admired the form so much. I always thought it was a beautiful object, and it's a type of Japanese shrine lantern. These occur most often associated to shrines. They may line the path by the hundreds as you walk up stone steps to the top of a hill where the shrine is, or there may be just a pair of them near the honden or the main building of the shrine. They're often a gift that a donor has made and then he gets his name put on it. I donated the lantern. But I think as a form they're quite attractive. You'll be the judge of that, see if you agree with me or not. And I chose to make one in the last few months speculatively. By making one, I learned about making one. So I studied about 90 different ones online. There's where it helps to read Japanese. And after studying them, they range from ordinary cheap ones to super deluxe, gold-plated ones. So there's a range. This one's roughly in the middle complexity. So I like to keep that as a perspective point as I put it together. This is, in fact, is a medium complexity lantern. However, as I study joinery a lot, there's no book where I could just look up a plan and make it. I have to think about how to solve various problems that come up in making a lantern. One thing about a modern lantern is I'm probably not going to light it with a candle or whale oil lamp. I'm going to put electrical into that. Now here's the post for the lantern. Just put it on here. Now my 2-hour talk, I actually assembled the post from pieces, but sorry, I'm having to truncate that part here. This post is roughly 5 by 5, something like that. And it's not a solid piece of wood. And it had suffered a little damage on the way in today. That's too bad. It's made of 4 pieces, tongue and groove, and sliding dovetail key locked together. There's 12 little hidden dovetail locks in there. It's quite a production to get it together. Did I do that for fun?
Yeah.
No. I was trying to solve a problem, and it's a very mundane problem. How do you run an electrical wire through a 4-foot post? Well, we're in 2009. You'd think there'd be something. A laser beam guided. No, there's nothing to drill a hole 4 feet long where you could be sure when you started here, it'd come out the other end. Even if you started each end, came halfway, the chances of them meeting in the middle, 0. Just about 0. I knew that from trying this sort of thing before. Don't, go there. So the solution, I could take a piece, cut it in half, mill a slot, glue them back together. But then we got the glue thing. So how to solve it? In time, I came up with the 4 pieces, tongued and grooved, and the pieces are locked together with a sliding joint, just like the cap on the sawhorse did. And then I have these little pairs of wedged pins that go in, that they go in, ramp up, and they lock, and that prevents anything from sliding against itself. So it becomes essentially a one-piece arrangement. Sticking out the top here are these 2 rods. They're buried inside, and they're captive. They cannot be pulled out because they have a fat head on the bottom. And the wood I chose for that, is it a traditional Japanese wood that has no, it's a wood that comes from the Caribbean called lignum vitae. Really neat wood. It's the heaviest, densest wood in the world. Okay, oak flooring, most of you might think that's pretty hard. This is 3.5 times harder than that.
It doesn't float.
That's right, you can make an anchor out of it and it would go down. Yeah. So I'm going to pass this around. It's just a little stick, 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. You can feel its waxy oiliness. That's its great virtue, and it was used in the great age of the sailing ships. Anywhere where a rope rubbed on something, they used this wood. It was even used in nuclear subs in the U.S. and through the 1940s and 50s as rubbing blocks for the prop shaft. Hydroelectric dams were also using it on the turbine shafts. Why? Because this wood outlasts bronze 3-to-1. Anyway, I'll pass it around, have a look, and see how it is to bend. Is it easy to bend or not? And get a feel for that. That's the wood I chose for those rods there.
Is that what they call ironwood?
Well, ironwood is a term like the word cedar that it's associated to many. If the wood's hard, it gets called ironwood, or in Australia, gumwood. But it's a generic term that doesn't, like in North America, there are probably 12 trees called cedars, and not one of them is actually a cedar tree.
Is it a cousin of ebony?
No, that's Diospyros, whereas lignum vitae is guaiacum. And the oil from it was a medicinal. In the 1600s, when it was brought back to Europe, they used to hang bark of it at the gate of the door of the church because they thought it warded off syphilis and bad things like that. So I have the dust from it. I'm actually interested to see what that stuff tastes like, but haven't ventured there yet. There's the rock. Typical Japanese buildings. The foundation or posts sit on rocks. So I'm putting this on a rock. There's the only metal that's going to be in this piece and mounted on it. Why a rock and not concrete? Concrete's cheap and easy. I can cast any form. You can cast concrete to look like rocks. Well, concrete also wicks water. Its design life really is about 50 years in Portland cement. So rocks, good design life. So I thought I'd go with that. And the bottom of the post has a couple of holes in it, which fit onto these rods.
How heavy is that post?
Well, I guess if I was in a marching band, I wouldn't want it as the baton or anything, but it's not too bad. So the metal rods come through into these little holes, one on each corner. Now if I didn't have an electrical cable in the middle, I would have put just one rod, but the electrical cable's got to go somewhere, so I've chosen to go to 2 rods, one on each side, and there's these mortises here to allow me to put a nut and a washer on the end of the rod to tighten it up. That's the next step.
How did you decide where to place those rods on the rock?
Well, obviously they had to be placed a certain place on the wooden pieces. Once they were already determined on the wood, then it was a matter of transferring that dimension to the rock. And then the fun part was actually putting the holes through the rock. Normally it would be kind of fun with a hammer drill, but I don't have a hammer drill right now. So I had to actually buy a drill bit and hammer it by hand and turn it to drill the holes through the rock.
In the kitchen?
I can say it's not a recommended course of action. It was 6 hours of bang bang and I don't want to do that again.
There's white on the bottom of the post.
That's correct.
What is that?
Well, I'm trying to seal the end grain that's exposed so that it doesn't breathe so fast. See, wood is kind of like a bundle of straws, conical arrangements of straws, one cone stacked up on top of the other, if you can imagine that. That's how a tree is. When you chop a tree trunk, basically you've got a bunch of straw ends sticking out. And wood loves to just soak up and in and out with the moisture that way. So to retard that breathing ability, I put by putting some tape on or oil-based paint on, or traditionally cashew tree-based paint, but I don't have any of that. So. Now these holes at the bottom, if this was installed to a finished location, I put a little plug into these holes, which conceals them and keeps the water out. I've also, the holes that go through, I've lined them with a plastic tube because metal has a lower dew point than wood, and any moisture will readily condense around metal much faster than wood. That's why any wooden fence you tend to look at always rots at the fasteners before any other place. So by lining the holes where the rods go through with plastic, my idea is to limit moisture transfer to the wood.
Condensation?
Yeah. That's from the dew point difference. Okay. So this is a lantern. The lantern is going to mount on top of here. This is only a support post. There is an electrical wire. I'm leaving that out today because it is daytime, and I could turn the light on it so I can look any different. So I'm just leaving that out. It also cuts the time down a little for me. The wire is routed, however, so it's completely invisible inside the structure. You wouldn't be able to see it once it's in. Now, like a tree that has a canopy, the next move is to take the trunk and spread out to carry a bit above. So these next pieces are part of that. Now, you won't be able to find a Japanese joinery book. There's a couple in English that's going to have this join on page 72. Joinery solves a problem. What is the problem? How to connect two things without taking too much meat out of one than another. So it requires a bit of thought and planning, and often when you're doing work that's outside the regular range of stuff, curious problems come up that require inventive solutions. And well, this was one of them. I wanted to have these rods in here, and I wanted to have an electrical cable in the middle. So these two pieces then, they lap each other. It's called a mitered half lap. And those two go together to form an X. Many Japanese lanterns have just 4 pieces coming out, and usually arranged on the side, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's enough. But there's fancier ones, and I went that route a little bit. So this has supports coming out at 8 points. This is the diagonal piece. There's several of these. They go in. So
in your spare time, do you design wooden puzzles?
well, I don't know. But,
Are your chisels Japanese or are they other?
Japanese. I do have one. I have 1 or 2 Western planes, special planes, but pardon me? Yes, they are. You are a woodworker, I can tell.
Or I look at catalogs.
I never like go lost everything.
It's good stuff. Yeah, this part, what looks like something out of the, Battlestar Galactica, is going to fit on top here. I just have to make sure what fits goes in the right spot. Like so. Now this is a bit of a tricky spot here where I've got to get it to go into quite a few little slots at once. These support pieces that kind of stick out like an arm, they're called hijiki. Hijiki, ki is wood and hiji is elbow wood. It's a Japanese term for it. Yeah! That's the paint again. I put paint on end grain to slow down its breathing. So.
Is there a key mark or something that you like let only fit one way, or will it fit like any?
Because I cut it by hand, there's very slight variations between pieces. So things are made particular for a spot. I probably could turn this, but of course these 2 rods make it possible to only be in 2 orientations. But I could possibly interchange some of these diagonals. I mean, they're reasonably close to one another. So this is tier 1, and next I put on what are called pillow blocks. Makito. These look like this. Kind of cute little rippers. The wood for this, by the way, is Honduran mahogany. It's been brought into England and America for a couple of 100 years because it's a lovely wood to make furniture out of. It's medium weight and works quite well. It doesn't tend to splinter. And I searched, I wanted to use a local wood, but I could not find in New England a supplier of a local wood that could supply me something dry have the grain I wanted and so forth. So I went down the road to the window and door place that specializes in mahogany windows and doors, and they sold me some. So I'll just put these on next. These are a common thing you'll see on a Japanese temple or shrine, and they function like a hand, like a cup to put something on. And one could put another whole piece of wood going do across there, but it's lighter to put just a little piece like that. But the idea is to the Japanese tale would go. The oak tree, while mighty and stiff, when the snow lands on it, the branch will break. The willow, which yields, will have the snow go on it, it will bend, the snow falls off, and it pops back up. So that's kind of their thinking, I guess, for flexible structures. And I know that's very much at variance with Western engineering ideas. Not to poo-poo Western engineering ideas, because they're wonderful, and some of those famous temples in Japan have steel trusses inside them now as a result. But obviously one wanting to build Japanese buildings in North America has to adhere to engineering standards here. But often there are good solutions between these two ideas. That's the next layer of pillow blocks. And now I'm doing another layer of the hijiki, these arm support pieces. I'm doubling them up. Reason being, I'm a little paranoid, and I thought these diagonal ones were a little weak, because they're cantilevered. Most of them is sticking out, and only a little is sticking in. I thought, that's not so strong. So what if I did another layer of them, in which I reversed it so the ones that are on the diagonals are stronger, and the ones going crosswise are weaker, and that would balance it. So that was my idea.
Did it work?
Well, so far it seems to work. As to what works, I mean, what is the time frame there? The Roman Pantheon is now 1,000-odd years old. It's concrete with no rebar. That worked. In fact, if you study concrete a little bit, you'll find some interesting things about rebar and what its purpose is that might surprise you. But also, my paranoia was such that I thought, why don't I put a cap in here to seal the space up between layers and also help stiffen it? And I made this cap. It's basically a small piece like so. This is not mahogany. This is a wood that kind of looks like it. That isn't. Gonçalo Alves, it's from Brazil. And I happened to get some from South Carolina. I haven't used it yet. It's too beautiful.
This whole thought process of why don't I do this to strengthen it, is that all before you touch the wood, or is it as you go along?
Some of it is as I go along. I am a person that likes to plan, but not in everything. If I go on a road trip, as my wife will say, I do not want to, I just throw my clothes in the car and let's go. I'm famous for going on bike rides where I forgot to eat, and 6 hours later, and I'm collecting berries by the roadside. So, but in woodworking, it's my thing. So I do plan. I drew this all out in 3D. But then as I go along in the making, certain things come to light. Now that I've cut this and I look at it, so I'll have another idea, and then I revise the design. And that, in a nutshell, is the advantage of being a person that designs a thing and makes the thing.
Yes.
Because you have this instant feedback loop, which you don't get when person A designs and person B makes. Because person B often resents person A, because they don't understand what person A, and person A might look down on person B who makes, because he's using his brain and he's using his hand, all that stuff. So the master builder tradition, which kind of started dying in the West in about 1840, 50, still is going in Japan to some extent, and in Europe. And that idea is of one person who has done every task and oversees the project. The master carpenter in Japan spends most of his time designing, making templates. A little bit of time still with the hands on the tools though. Always the hand on the tool, because while my eyes tell me a lot, my fingers tell me a lot too, and the smell and the sound. Whereas if I'm sitting in a room in front of a computer screen, clicking, which I do a lot of, something's missing. Just as a person who never designs and only makes, something's missing. No brain, just hands. Hands are good, but by designing as well, you expand your range of thinking about why something could be one way and not another, and then you make it and it didn't work, and then you learn something next time. I think it's a great process. And now we put on the next pieces. You need to send it back when you get it. Okay.
I have a quick question about the post.
Yes,
Did you explain how you sculpted the bottom to form to the rock?
I did not. Yeah, you notice the post is fitted to the rock. The rock, in fact, it's just a rock, right? There's lots of rocks in New England. I looked for 4 months to find that rock. I wanted a rock that was flattish on the bottom, sort of rounded. After looking high and low, it was in the river across the road. I pulled it out, it was covered with pond scum, and then I cleaned it off. And so yeah, to fit it, first of course the post is cut square on the bottom, and I slide it on, I get it all plumb, and then I scribe with a tool, one surface to the other, cut the wood away, I try it again, I make some adjustments. If you're having a good day, it goes in 3 tries. If you're not having a good day, it ends with the piece being thrown down the throat. At one point, yes, that would be in fact the case. But a good day, you do 2 of these in a day, maybe to fit in. A bad day, it's 1 whole day, and it doesn't quite come out right. So, but as you get more practiced, things tend to come out right more often than otherwise. And one last piece. So as I mentioned, I wanted the diagonals to be the stronger bits here, and the crosswise ones to be a little weaker. So they're a little slimmer. This one, in fact, was originally slimmer. I've made this one a taller piece than all the others by about 1/8, because I had room to do that. I'll explain that in a second here. Just put this one on. That's the next layer.
Earlier in your presentation, did you say what measurement system you use? Because you just said an inch. So.
I actually work in decimal inches. So if I say 0.125, this audience, maybe some people wouldn't know what that meant exactly, so I will tend to speak in fractions, but I don't like working in fractions because they're not that they're hard to work with, but it's easy to confuse numbers sometimes with fractions. You measure, oh, it's 3/8, and then you walk over here and your mind turned it to 3/4, and you cut something. Japanese have their own measuring system, incidentally called the shakanho, and it has a foot called a shaku, and that's 11.93 inches, almost the same as our foot. But it's divided into 10 inches, not 12. And that inch is then divided into 10. I mean, it's all based on 10. I like that because my calculator, which I use quite a bit of, it also works on that idea of base 10. So I always work in decimal because I don't need to convert to fractions all the time. Next layer, what is the next layer? Okay, the next layer is the floor of the lantern. It's composed of 5 pieces. Just have to make sure I have a good idea which piece is which here. Looking good, okay. a second to make sure I put these in the right spots. There's a G. What's this? Later. B. So. Yeah. All right.
You ever label them so you don't get confused?
Well, they are labeled. There's little letters on stuff here. Just making sure that all looks good. A little bit of tapping. Distinct feeling those are the wrong way around. Yes, they are. Okay. Well, I can reverse them. But this takes a few more moments, so please bear with me.
This is a lot like the Chinese roof systems.
Yes, to the, yeah, I did have it backwards. Chinese and Japanese roofs, to someone not familiar with them, may look similar, just as German timber buildings and French ones have certain similarities. But there are quite a lot of differences, and that would be a long little story. One thing you can't say about Chinese buildings is that they are almost invariably tile roofed. And in Japan, tiles are popular. They are a sign of wealth to have a tile roof. Shingled roofs, thatched roofs. It's quite a diverse range.
When you construct these, I'm assuming you hold the pieces in a vise, no?
I either sit on them and work on it. Sometimes I will put a clamp on here to keep it in place.
You know, French dogs or anything?
Well, I don't know where I'd put them. Sometimes I'll clamp a little stick of wood here if I'm planing so it doesn't slide off. Many Japanese workmen, particularly in furniture making and other trades, actually work on the floor. So their bench, is 4 inches off the ground, and they sit on a pillow. They haven't used their feet to hold stuff. I'm quite comfortable on the floor too, but I generally work standing up. There's a certain thing about working on the floor that is nice, and that is there's a certain intimacy when you're right up close to something, on top of it almost. That is lovely. Sorry for the noise. This layer of wood is the sill for the lantern. The word for sill is Pagoda, earth platform. Next I'm putting these little wedging, it's a curious noise.
It's a vibrating cell phone.
Do you sharpen your own chisels?
Of course,
I assume that's a regular task.
that's the foundation of the woodwork. You cannot cut cleanly if you can't have a sharp tool. Thus, really, just as the foundation of this is that stone, foundation of the woodwork is also stones, sharpening stones.
I'm picturing you having to do that at least once a day.
Oh no! If I was planing a post that was worth $2,000, and I had only a hair of space to work with, if I overdid it would be too much room between. Well, I'll sharpen probably for an hour and a half to get it, and I might take 10 passes. As soon as I tell my planes is starting to get the 10, I'll resharpen. Now that's an approach to it, very expensive. And I worked on a billionaire's house in California for a couple of years. I remember being in his games room, planing the door, and the doors had to miss each other by just this little amount. I started planing and the wood tore out. It's terrifying. You're just sweating and it's life and death. And I mean, to me it was. So then I sharpened and well, I got it to go just fine, and I really like my plane after that. It's kind of a friend of mine.
Is that Larry Ellison?
That is Larry Ellison, yeah.
How did you fix that door you
The
built?
day you want to take off.
I just got the tool sharper, and planing is a funny reflection of your internal state. If you're impatient, you don't notice stuff. You get focused on get this done, and then something bad happens. So often, the thing bad happening is a little hello, step back a bit, kind of get back into touch with, without getting too mystical about it, but getting a little more in the present with the thing you're doing and aware of stuff. And with a plane, that means, I didn't really sharpen it that well. The sole of the plane, and the sole of a plane made of wood, it changes all the time. You're dragging it, it's getting hot, it slightly moves. It doesn't matter if you're taking a thick shaving, but if you're trying to take a 5-micron shaving or something really thin, it matters, every little nuance like that. So, well, I just have to tap a few things here. Everything. The shaving tells me everything about the plane I need to know, and whether I'm aware and perceive those things or not. And sometimes I'm in a darn hurry and I don't. And the result's not quite as good. The lantern is now complete to the floor, and I have 10 minutes to complete this. Will I make it?
Are you going to give us even a 2 or 3 minute description of how you use your chisels?
No. I could have given a talk for this whole period only on sharpening stones and the mining and the guys, because that's interesting to me. The chisels and their technology, well, that's as interesting as samurai swords. And they share similar techniques, as a matter of fact, in how they're made.
I got an easy one for you. Can you tell us where you were during your 5-year stay in rural Japan?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I did move around a little bit. 4 of the 5 years I was in Hokkaido, which is the northern island, and that's 6 million people, most of whom live in Sapporo. Sapporo's got a lovely subway system, and it's a really nice little city, mountains in the background. And I wasn't in Sapporo except for about 3 months. And then I lived in on Honshu, that's the mainland, where Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka are. And I lived near a city called Sendai, a little bit north again, in a suburban setting with a, yeah. So 4 years in Hokkaido, 1 year on the mainland.
Where in Hokkaido were you?
Little towns. One's called Rikubetsu, and it's famous as the coldest place in Japan. And the town's symbol on the sign when you drive in is a snowman shivering next to a thermometer. I was there for 2.5, and then another place on the coast for a year and a half.
Which one was that?
Toyo-ura, which is Toyo, same as Toyota, same character. Luxuriant harbor. I kind of wondered about that because of the concrete they were pouring in the harbor for the new sports center. But okay, now I'm onto the screen panels that I made. Here, my explanation is becoming somewhat truncated because I'm down to 6 minutes to complete this. So,
How many hours did this take you to make?
yeah, that's a very good question. I stopped counting. And there's a difference in prototyping something. First time I made this, most things I make it's the first time, frankly. I don't produce stuff. And now I know that division of labor and production economies do realize greater profits, but I would get bored if I did the same thing again and again and again. I'm not suited to that. And I always want to tinker. So, you know, the time it took me to make this as a prototype versus the amount of time it would take me to make, say, another pair of them, well, the next ones I make would probably take half as long. And if I had to make 100 of them, well, we'd be down to 20 minutes each. Maybe not. Okay, now the next thing is the roof.
You're not putting the panel over there?
What's that?
Panel isn't over
That'll go on later. See, you gotta be able to change the light bulb. And if I put all the panels in and I couldn't get out, I'd be painted in the corner in tears. This is the roof.
Thank you more than the 6 minutes explaining that.
Yeah, I could have probably spent the whole time explaining just this and that. You are getting shortchanged, I'm afraid, the all part fitting for this. That in one swell swoop.
So how often will you see something like this in Japan versus something that's a little bit more mass-produced, maybe with aluminum in it and...
Don't say that. I've never seen an aluminum one. I'm sure they have concrete ones. They have concrete everything. So Japan pours almost as much concrete per year as the United States. Interesting factoid. Results in, for every square foot here, they have 30 there of concrete. You go in a Japanese bookstore, look in the trades section, carpentry, you get one shelf of four shelves in one section. Turn around and the concrete goes for like as far as you can see. All the books on concrete. They're right into it.
Why is that?
I don't know. Okay, I'm not done yet. Not done. See, there's another panel to put in. This panel is, unlike the others, removable, and I made these little tiny L-shaped keys. These panels actually were among the most difficult parts to make of this because they're all funky, weird compound joinery and a bit of a nightmare. But anyway, sometimes I made them the way they are because they have basically a diagonal brace in. I wanted the housing to be as stiff as possible against any possible twisting load that some vandalizing type person might wish to.
Did you sell these to the Japanese?
Did I?
Yeah.
No, I just made this a month ago or two.
I mean, similar woodworking projects, were you employed by someone or were you self-employed?
I'm self-employed. Over there, I never worked for a carpentry company. I did apprentice with a swordsmith for a while. And I used to go by carpentry companies and I'd get pieces of wood and work on stuff for my house. But I've been through traditional Japanese apprenticeships in other areas and I figured I could make enough mistakes all by myself, so I decided to do that. All right, completed. Thank you. 2 minutes for any other questions. I leave them like that. I might, they're getting a little scuffed. The one thing about this particular lantern is taking a lot more punishments than it would otherwise. This is the 6th presentation I've done. This has been apart and together and apart and together. And wood gets compressed and then comes back a little. And once you're done, it's just not going to be as tight and snug a fit as when it's just a brand new piece. So, and I did debate for a while whether to put the white paint on. It's, you know, it's an aesthetic consideration as it is a practical one. These little thingies on the end here, there's a hanging fish, geggyo are called, and it's a little pendant to cover the end grain of the ridgepole, which you can't see inside there. It's also my company crest, so that's why. It's a Chinese bellflower coming out of a pentagon.
Is the stone suspended on those two pieces of wood?
At the moment, yeah. Again, if I install this outside, it's going to be on a concrete pier in the ground. The stone will be buried about 1 inch deep, so it'll look like it's just coming out of the ground. That's the intended.
And strongly.
I really don't think so. No. Once the rods are into the concrete foundation, and then I grout between the two, it was absolutely rigid. I mean, yes, if you drove your Buick into it, it probably would. but it's more than adequate for any kind of wind or snow. Yes?
Would that be the sort of classical Japanese type use of a shrine?
This?
Yeah.
Yes, it very much is that form. Would you find one in Japan identical to this? No. This is my version. But the proportions are traditional, and that's between all the parts. The arrangement structurally is a traditional arrangement. You won't find this type of diagonal screen because they're very hard to make. And I didn't get that till I made it. Most of these have screens with the bars going like a grid. Much easier. I mean, literally 2 weeks easier. Still, see, sometimes it's what it looks like an aesthetic thing, but there's this diagonal bracing. In fact, the pieces that occupy the middle of this are 30-second fatter than the ones around it. It's not visible, obviously, but it's stiffer that way. So if someone wanted to twist it, some bad kid. Maybe, perhaps myself as a young man, it's going to be more resistant. That was my idea.
I'll try to, this is not a carpentry question, okay, it's a mechanical question. Since you don't sand and you plane, when you have a tiny piece, such as the pieces that form the design on the screen, do you move those over a plane, or do you have very, very small planes? Because I'm trying to picture how you work with such a tiny piece of wood with a plane such as the one that you showed us.
Yeah, I find special ways to hold the piece of wood so it doesn't move, and I do have smaller planes. There are planes that are basically this big, and there are planes that are this long, longer, bigger, wider planes. There are planes in Japan that are a foot wide that you pull over a beam. You gotta be really strong to do that. And you don't take a thick shaving, you take a very, very thin one, and you have to be a genius to do it. But there's a huge range. In fact, I was under the impression that Western tools were rather narrow until I went to the Winterthur Museum in Delaware, and there was a range of carpentry tools, and I was like, oh, they had those back then too. Okay, there's various, types of chisels I didn't think were even in Western carpentry. But there's a huge range of, I have 50 hand saws, 60 chisels, 30 planes. I mean, and I have what would be a normal kind of set. I'm not like a collector. I just have to do the range here.
The extension of that question would be, does Japanese carpentry use like a series of fixtures and jigs and things that you would make for?
Sure, if you're doing a repetitive thing, like a guy that makes shoji screens, the grid work, they have little jigs to hold things and special tools purposely for a certain kind of cut. If you're doing anything repetitive, it's just logical to do that, to have the tool most optimized to the particular task.
If you had this outside, what kind of maintenance would it require? Is there something you would do to keep it as neutral as it is, or would just you expect the weather to be part of its evolution as a piece? How would you think?
Exactly what you just said. Weather would be a part of the evolution of the piece. Western culture, as an insider, I could say we do have a bit of an obsession with youth here, and people strive to stay looking young, and wood that starts outside starts to go a little bleached. Oh, we can't have that. And thus we want to put paint but mahogany is extremely durable. A friend of mine in California planted in his wife's garden sticks of various species, which lasted the longest. The mahogany did. So yes, out in the sun, it will get a little stain. It will probably have rotten leaves fall on it. It will get a patina. The people in the art and antiques world love the patina on something. So once you get over that slightly uncomfortable, it's not as what it would look like. Once you get over that and let it gracefully age. Right across from where I live, there's a mill, and it has pine planks on it that are 125 years old. They've lost a 1/4 inch of their wood to weathering. That is the most beautiful surface. I guarantee if you would just had some guy out there painting it every 15, 12 years or whatever it is, and it seems that maintenance often slips off over the course of a lifetime of a building. Because who likes doing that? Once the paint gets all flaky and peeling, then people just paint over it. So the wood doesn't last any longer doing that. So, Joe, if you want to...
Go ahead, Chris.
I wondered if you're familiar with, in Leverett, Mass, there's a Japanese peace pagoda.
Yes,
only
it's
one
just
on
up the
the
road
eastern
from me.
coast.
And I might be doing
Oh,
some work
really?
for them in the spring.
Well, the pagoda itself, I think it's concrete, it's a dome shape, but they also had built another building,
Yeah,
more in this style,
Yeah.
wood, and a year after all their
it
work,
burned down.
it burned down.
Yeah,
You're familiar with that?
Iwao, what's his name? A guy in Long Island, Japanese carpenter in Long Island built that. I've chatted with his wife on the phone. Yeah, just after they finished, it burned down.
Oh, I thought it was the monks and the kids from UMass who built it, no?
No.
That's a bummer then.
Yes?
Do you have any English language websites you could recommend for Japanese?
I happen to write a carpentry blog. Now, I study Western and Eastern carpentry. I read Japanese. Having gone to school, I developed this bizarre habit of looking in books. And thus, I read a lot on carpentry. I go to the Library of Congress and dig stuff out of there whenever I go. Because I think anything in Western carpentry, after about 1875, there's really nothing more to say. And Eastern carpentry, probably about the same. That reached its peak in about the same period. So I like to go back and find out what lessons there were to glean. And so I have a carpentry blog I write. It's called The Carpentry Way. Right now I'm detailing about that French sawhorse. I've also write on green building, things like that.
You write for Taunton Press?
I do not.
Split some.
I have. I used to teach timber framing in BC at a college. I've taught Western timber framing. No, I'd love to though, but opportunity hasn't arisen yet. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming.
I guess what I was doing, Daddy was, did you see how Daddy was